Growing up, my mommy always told me that violence is never the answer. You know, if I ever had an issue with somebody, it was always best to go at it with more of a diplomatic approach. Sometimes that's not always the case, but I've learned that that philosophy has remained the same. That is, of course, unless you're a celebrity, in which case, start pounding away. You've earned it. You've got the money. And while there are a lot of very, very angry and violent celebrities out there, I think nobody encapsulates that more than our buddy, Chris Brown. Some of you might know the name Chris Brown immediately. He's a very, very famous person. Some of you will know him from the music that he puts out there. Everybody else knows him as the guy that beat up Rihanna, the Queen. And while that is one of the more infamous things that he's known for, he has a very vast history of being very violent, especially towards women. So what did Rocky Balboa do this time? Did he beat somebody else up? Did he do another act of violence? Yeah. But this time is a little bit different because he decided to beat up fans, and now he's being sued for it. Recently, it's been announced that Chris Brown is being sued for $50 million in damages for essentially beating up 4 people. And along with that, a temporary restraining order has also been filed against him. You know, just in case. Now, some of you might be asking, why? How did this happen? What caused Chris Brown to go into such an act of violence? Surely he was threatened by something. He was just defending himself. He had to take care of his own, you know? No, that's not what happened, and the entire situation is just so stupid. So essentially what happened, after one of his concerts in Texas, 4 men decided to go backstage because they paid for a backstage pass. So it's important that these are not people that snuck backstage. This is stuff that these people paid for. So these men, they show up backstage, and then Chris Brown eventually comes 30 minutes late, by the way, so kind of an asshole move on Chris Brown's part. But you know, celebrities, they work on their own time, you know? And while the details of how that meeting itself went are still unclear, near the end, one of the people went up to Chris Brown and wanted to congratulate him on his, really, really good performance that he just did. Which then caused one of the people in Chris Brown's entourage to immediately point out, hey, you used to have beef with Chris Brown, and then he pointed it out to Chris Brown. I don't know what the beef was or what the issue between them were, but this was pointed out to Chris Brown, which then prompted Chris Brown to be like, oh, yeah, you're right. And then he ordered 10 members of his entourage to start beating this guy up, and then started beating everybody else up that was there with them, the other 3 guys. And the details are a lot more disturbing when you realize that one of the guys actually tried to leave, which then prompted Chris Brown to order that they start beating that guy up too. It's something about chairs being thrown, being hit in the head for 10 minutes. The entire thing was really, really messed up. And it's even more messed up when you consider that this was a paid for thing. They went there expecting just a nice meeting, and then they ended up getting pounded. They were jumped, which then prompted all 4 of these people to go to the hospital. Well, I guess you have to give it to Chris Brown too. He's upgraded. He's no longer using his own fists. He's using 20 other spare fists by people they probably paid. After an illustrious past of beating up women, and realizing that he was now gonna have to fight a man, he realized, nah, I don't need to do that. I'll just let these guys do it. Because he knew he'd probably lose. And it's just incredibly sick that this thing happened. Chris Brown is essentially rage from inside out, except instead of bursting into flames and having fire pop out the top of his head, he beats up women. But this is one of the first times that he was actually confronted by a man. Though confronted is not exactly the right word, because there was no aggressive action towards him. They went there for a meet and greet, and then one of the guys on the entourage was like, well, actually, and then immediately sensing blood in the water, and I'm sure he was, he was itching to beat something up, so he was like, yeah, let's get those guys. And then he sat back and just watched while eating popcorn while he got 10 other people to beat up for him. The details of this entire situation are still very fresh, and I don't know if a lot more details are going to come out in the future, though the details that we do have, I think, are enough, because again, this was not a provoked attack. This was just these guys going for a meet and greet and then being beaten up because apparently one guy had beef, quote unquote, though I'm sure the beef was something stupid or whatever. What makes this thing even more gross is that this is a situation where the brain dead people on Twitter, so to be expected, are all huddling around Chris Brown like, no, he's a good man, he'd never do anything like this. He's a reformed guy. He's an excellent artist. To which I have to say, baloney. Because even though the thing with Rihanna was a while ago, he still has a past, a very recent past, of committing acts of violence and rage. I think the most recent thing that happened was that he was at a performance and then he took some lady's phone and then threw it into the crowd. Not exactly something that you'd expect from somebody that is reformed and level-headed. So just going down the list of things that he's done, he beat up Rihanna, he beat up another ex-girlfriend, so Rihanna wasn't just the only person, and then there's the incident of him throwing the phone into the crowd. And I'm sure there's other incidents out there that I'm just not naming at the moment because his resume is quite vast. But this time it looks like it's come back to bite him. $50 million is nothing to scoff at. It isn't a little bit of schmeckles, it is a whole tub of doubloons. Even for somebody as rich as Chris Brown, losing $50 million is a massive blow, and it's one that is more than deserved. Just considering how scummy the entire altercation was, because it was just 4 guys and he was surrounded by 10 people of his own entourage that he ordered to beat these 4 guys up. I also saw somebody else say a statement that I read somewhere where somebody was claiming, well, actually these 4 guys, they went there to attack Chris Brown. They wanted to really put the hurt on him. Chris Brown's mom was there, his family was there, he was only defending them. To which I also have to say, baloney. Listen, I don't know about you, but if I had beef with a celebrity, the last place that I'm gonna go beat up that celebrity or cause harm to that celebrity is their concert, because they are surrounded by not only security, so the odds of getting to that performer or whoever it is very, very slim, but you're also surrounded by a sea of thousands of people that paid good money to see that performer, who would probably rip you to shreds if that performer commanded them to, which is something that pretty much happened to them, just to a much more, I guess, thankfully smaller degree, with only 10 people instead of 10,000. At the end of the day, this is just a very sad situation that I feel for these 4 guys that have been severely hurt and damaged for no real reason, and it's yet just another example of Chris Brown trying to pretend that he's Rocky Balboa and trying to fight people, this time a little bit different because I don't think he actually threw a punch. As these weeks go by, I'm sure more details on this lawsuit will come out, and whether or not they're gonna win, they're gonna win. You know, the damages done are just so overwhelming that I don't see a situation where they don't win this lawsuit, because they deserve it. Trust me, if I got jumped by 10 guys, I'd want a couple doubloons in my pocket as well. And I don't even think that'd be enough. But at the end of the day, we're just gonna have to wait and see what happens. I hope the best for these guys, and I hope people stop riding Chris Brown's, boing, because frankly, the fact that he still has any supporters that like him as an individual is still shocking. And there are some people who are like, well, he's an excellent performer. Yeah, but he's a terrible person. I don't know how many women he has to beat up for that point to be proven, but I guess, I don't know. But at that point, I think that's just on you and your terrible, terrible judge of character. But that's it for me today. Thank you so much for watching, if indeed you still are. My name is Brockster, and I bid you all adieu.